Thank you for coming to talk to us today.
That's my pleasure.
The first thing I want to ask you is what are your specific priorities and policy aims for the Sheffield Hallam constituency?
For Sheffield Hallam constituency, a lot of Sheffield Hallam is a student population. I think between a third and a half. I think there's quite a lot, and it's obvious from what happened last time that students are really, really looking hard at what parties have to offer. So the Green Party is saying that what we want to do is abolish student fees altogether. Now, I know that has a sort of ring about it. But I think if you look at the whole of the Green Party policy, then you can see that it fits right in with everything else. It's not something that's an add-on. It's really part of our full education policy. It's part of our full valuing people policy.
Right.
So that's a really important part of it. Going on from there, we're looking at employment rights, we're looking at 0 hours contracts, getting rid of 0 hours contracts, for example. We think it's really not a good idea to have 0 hours contracts.
Yeah.
People aren't capable of planning their lives on that basis, so it's really important to do something about that.
Right.
So those are two of the policies.
Right, and more specifically to Sheffield, is there anything you'd like to, I don't know, change or...
Within Sheffield itself,
Yes.
One of the things we want to do is to make sure that the transport system is working as well as it can do, and that means we want to make sure that there's money invested in the transport system, that there's more room given to cycling and to walking, because these are two of the ways we can get around without having to use our cars. It's much more healthy, both for ourselves as individuals and for the planet as a whole. If you, like me, have to get around Sheffield, certainly within the centre, you'll find there's a lot of traffic jams. You're sitting for ages. No, I don't swear. Sorry. Swearing at all the other traffic that's there. Why are you there? I want to get where I want. No, but so trying to get greater walking, greater cycling facilities, at the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, so that people are much safer on the roads. So these are some of the things we want to see around Sheffield. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Do you think the Green success in last year's council elections could be replicated in the general election?
Well, I certainly think it can. I'm standing in Sheffield Hallam, so I'm standing against Nick Clegg. I'm in the polls. I'm not actually winning at the moment, but that doesn't mean to say that, with more, there's a Green surge going on. With more Green surge, that doesn't, I could come up there. And a lot of the people I speak to, or who communicate via email or telephone or whatever, are very enthusiastic about the Green Party programme. So I'm still hopeful that in Hallam we'll have another bit of surge, and I'll be able to get up there. Now, but that's not true in Sheffield Central. Right. In Sheffield Central, we are the challengers to Labour.
Right.
In 2010, it was Paul Scriven of the Lib Dems who came within a squeak of winning the constituency, and but in 2014's local elections, they'd fallen right back, and we were over 30% in the polls. We came first in 2 of the wards, second in 3 of the wards. So we are the natural challengers now. And in fact, it is there that almost all of our efforts are being spent, because we have to try and get at least one breakthrough. Gillian Creasy, who is absolutely brilliant as a councillor, will make an incredibly good MP, and on top of that you get all the Green Party policies, which seem to be very popular. If you go to Vote for Policies, do you know the website Vote for Policies?
No, I haven't actually heard of it.
Right, so in 2010 they ran it then. The Greens came out top with about 27%. Labour was second on about 20%, so it was it was quite an appreciable lead in terms of that. When people went on there, they found, our policies match the Greens. So, right?
Yes.
They've started this up again. There's been so far not very many, because it's only just started in the last couple of days. I think it's something like 11,000 people have gone on there. We're way ahead. We're up about 35% at the moment. So our policies are chiming even more with the population. So I think our policies are our big selling point.
Yes.
Plus the fact that we do have an actual central vision, which I can't see in any of the other parties. Our central vision of more equality, of making sure that the climate problems are dealt with. A lot of other parties say, "Oh, we'll deal with it." And in fact, there was a joint statement between the three dinosaur parties the other day, and they all said, "Oh, we'll deal with it." But we've heard that all before. We've heard about the greenest government ever from the Tories. It didn't work. With us, it's a central part of our being, if you want, our philosophy. So so we're there. Our vision is there, and I think a lot of people are beginning to chime with that.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. In some constituencies, it's undeniable that voting for Green is sort of playing into the hands of the right because of obviously the numbers of people voting. But what would you say to voters concerned about that?
I'd say more than ever this year. We've done this, haven't we? We've done the tactical voting bit for year after year, general election after general election. Yes. Has it got us where we want to go? I'd argue no, it hasn't. It's got us into a position where we can't move away from the austerity that's been imposed on us, because people are saying, "Oh, you're a debt denier," or whatever it is. Well, the Green Party is actually promising a move away from austerity. We are challenging that particular orthodoxy, and we do think that this general election, it's a very different general election from any other that's gone before, certainly since the war. I don't remember back to the war. I do remember back to Harold Wilson winning in 1964, was it? I do remember that far back. But every election since then has been, oh, shall we keep the same people in or just swap for the others? And it's been that swap. And I don't think it's got us anywhere. So I think now, more than ever, is the time to have a real, long, hard think and vote for what you actually believe in, instead of voting for the party that's the second worst, if you want. Yes?
Yes, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like you said, Sheffield Hallam is full of students. Aside from the tuition fee promise, why should students vote for you?
I think that's a fairly straightforward answer. If you look at the programme for the others, they're looking backwards and fighting past battles that may or may not have been relevant back at the time. Very few of those parties are actually proposing anything that mean anything for the future. They're not proposing anything that will increase equality. They're not proposing anything particular, apart from just this vague promise of tackling climate change, about the climate. They're not doing anything for bringing transport back under public control, for bringing all these things that have been privatised back into public control. I'm thinking about the NHS. Labour are making vague promises around it. And I think the one really big thing here, and a lot of people haven't heard of this, is something called the TTIP, which is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is currently being negotiated between the USA and the EU. And if it goes through, this means transnational corporations will be able to sue governments if those governments bring in any law that damages the company's profits.
Right.
Now, think about that for a while. That means if the Greens, by some miracle, were to form a government, and I agree it would be a miracle, it would mean a huge Green surge, but it's nevertheless really worthwhile voting for us because of the pressure we put on the other parties to change their policies. If we were to propose something that fought climate change, to stop people fracking, for example, then we could be sued if this thing was in place, if this treaty was in place. And all the fracking companies that wanted to frack would then say, oh, we'll have a couple of billion because that's profit lost. Okay, so this sort of thing. So it would put, and it's not just us, it's any government would be sued for almost any measure they'd take. So it would put a real dampener on what governments think they can get away with. So democracy is sort of going. It's sort of going by the board. We've already seen that the gagging law. Do you remember the gagging law that came in about 2013?
Yes. Yeah.
The gagging law is having a really, really awful effect on our democracy by means of charities and other pressure groups not being able to function as they want to in the run-up to this election. So that's one part of democracy going, and the TTIP is another. And just for those who knew about TTIP, there is another one on the way called TISA. It's a Trade in Services Agreement, which is even more harsh on governments and pro-corporate profits. So we would be there trying our very hardest to get rid of TTIP and to make sure that in the future we aren't a planet ruled by corporations, that everybody within, the individuals, we all have that say. I'll finish on that with one last point, and that's about the voting system. The voting system that we've got at the moment really favours no change.
Right.
It means that you either vote for the blue Tories or the red Tories. And if you do that ad infinitum, you won't get a change. So first past the post has that effect.
Right.
So if we were to have any chance at all within the next government, any power at all within the next government, we would be pressing very hard for a change in the voting system, so that our votes would actually count, and it would be a lot less difficult to change tack and to actually choose a party which would be able to change things.
Right, okay. What sort of system would you be looking at? Something that just favours smaller parties?
I can tell you the intricate details of the system.
No.
Okay, it's called AMS. If anybody wants to look it up, it's called AMS, Additional Member System.
Okay, brilliant. So in terms of students again, a lot of students work for a minimum wage, and one of the Green policies is to increase it to £10 an hour by 2020.
Yes.
How is that economically viable to do that? Obviously, it'd be great for students if that was put into place.
Not just students, but you're right.
Course,
students would benefit from it greatly. You're quite right.
Yes.
Right. Okay. How's it economically viable? Two things to say about that. The first thing is that the government would not then be topping up people's wages, because a lot of the benefits that are paid out to working people because they aren't earning enough money. So the government would actually be spending less money. Now, that means that companies that employ people, like Starbucks and McDonald's, and a lot of these companies that employ people on 0 hours contracts or on minimum wage, or both, would actually be paying out a lot more in wages, or a little bit more. It's actually not all that much. It's about £1.40 an hour or something like that between the minimum wage and the living wage. So we go straight to the living wage, which is £7.65 an hour, and try very hard to up that as fast as possible to £20. We've made the pledge to do it by 2020. I think we'd like to do it before then. Yes. When the minimum wage came in as a law, I've forgotten when it was, a lot of companies said, we'll all go out of business. It didn't happen, and in fact a lot of businesses thrived as a result of it. Now, of course, we've gone back to the position where minimum wage doesn't really mean minimum wage because nobody enforces it. So we've got a lot of people, my daughter is looking for pay that pays more than, work that pays more than £2.50 an hour. Because that's all she can find at the moment.
Right.
£2.50 an hour is barely worth going to work for, with all the expenses of getting to work and etc. So, and the minimum wage just isn't policed properly. There are a lot of things undercutting the minimum wage, which we're aiming to do away with.
Yes. No, I see. If you went into a coalition, some green policies would have to be kept, and some obviously you'd have to get rid of, compromise. Which, in your opinion, of the Green Party policies are important to stick to regardless of circumstance?
Okay, I'll start by denying any suggestion that we would go into coalition.
Okay.
Right. Now, we may hold the balance of power if you want. It may be that we'll have 3 or 4 MPs, or maybe a few more, who knows. And without those, no party would have a majority. Now, what we're saying is we're going to vote policy by policy without going into a coalition. So we wouldn't accept any ministerial posts.
Right.
But we would vote policy by policy, and we would hope that in supporting the majority party's particular a particular policy, they would then support one of ours. Now, which of our policies would we want to see going through? I think it's really important to say that our climate policies are absolutely vital.
Yes.
Because if we don't put our climate policies through, the chances of our combating climate change effectively go down the drain. We're lagging behind many of the countries, both in Europe and across the world, in this, and we really need to up our game. And I think the other thing is, for me at any rate, and I can't speak for the rest of the party, but for me, it would be the voting system, because I think that is a real, it's a real break on change, and we do need some change. And I'm not saying any change is good, because some changes are going to be changes for the worse, but we do need the ability to change.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Finally, coming back to the tuition fee promise, do you not think that promising to abolish tuition fees is, in fact, after the Lib Dems have said, oh, we shouldn't have promised that, it wasn't economically viable and all that, do you not think it's giving false hope?
Yeah, well, I think I sort of touched on that right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But yes, I understand how people feel that way. And I think what I've said at the beginning was, if you look at the rest of our whole vision, our whole vision is for greater equality. And we're saying that tuition fees and student loans, student debt, aren't really working in favour of equality. They're working against equality. One of the other things to say is that the student fees system is actually costing the government more than the cost of university tuition was before student fees came in. So yes, we would have to look very long and hard at what systems we would put in place. But let me say this, when I was at university, I didn't pay my student fees, the government did. I actually got a grant. I didn't come out with, my wife both, she came out with savings. She came out of university with savings. I didn't come out with savings, but on the other hand, I didn't come out with debt either. And which means that I could straight away be a useful, non-drag on the economy type citizen. Whereas if you've got debt, and I have to say, the levels of debt are higher at the moment in this country than they have ever been. Forget about 2008 when the banks went. The levels of debt, and that's personal debt rather than national debt, are huge. And I think it's a really sensible idea to try and stop people getting into those sorts of levels of debt. And I think that anybody who says we can't afford it, well, I say, I think we can't afford not to do it.
Right. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.